Welcome to Trinidad and Tobago Opposition's Sunday Media Briefing, this Sunday, the 5th of May, 2024, discussing the Auditor General and Nyquan. Today, our presenters are MP Rudranath Indarsingh, Shadow for Labour, and MP Davendranath Tancoo, Shadow for Finance. Thank you for attending. We will begin our press conference shortly. In the meanwhile, please share the live.
As you walk with us to the part of life, you will never have to walk alone. Come on!
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high and don't be afraid.
You'll never walk alone with the UNC.
The new Couver Children's Hospital will offer critical medical care to both children and adults, with a 3-story bed tower dedicated to pediatrics and women's care containing 80 beds, and a second 3-story bed tower dedicated to adult patients containing 150 beds. From the moment you enter through the hospital's front doors, you will be greeted with the sights of a spectacular lobby flooded with natural light streaming in through the overhead canopy. As we venture past the reception area, the ground floor opens up into the Pediatric Clinic and Children's Rehab Center, located in the Pediatric Tower, and the Adult Outpatient Clinic and Pharmacy, located in the Adult Tower.
This is the pediatric waiting area in the Pediatric Outpatient Clinic at Couver Children's Hospital. This area was designed to be fun and engaging with age-appropriate furniture to limit the anxiety of the guardians and those in their care. We're now taking you through a part of the Pediatric Outpatient Clinic on the ground floor at the Couver Children's Hospital. This area has 11 examination rooms, which allow facilities for our doctors and nurses to undergo medical outpatient clinics and minor treatment and dressing.
We believe that the management of emergency cases should be as least stressful on our staff, the visitors and you, our patients. This is why we have dedicated 3 specific areas for entrance into the hospital: adult emergency, pediatric emergency, and our trauma corridor.
This is also why any child coming in through the Children's Emergency Department will be attended to by doctors and nurses specially trained in pediatric care. Welcome to the Pediatric Emergency Department at the Couver Children's Hospital. I'm walking you through the pediatric waiting area. In this area, we have 3 registration desks where your pediatric emergency cases will be dealt with. This area is a triage area. This is where your assessment will be done, and then you'll be further directed to the more appropriate location for further assessment and treatment. Within the Pediatric Emergency Department, there are 5 examination rooms, 5 treatment bays, and 2 resuscitation areas. Let me show you a pediatric examination room. Within this area, your specialized doctors and nurses will examine a patient after an emergency. This is a procedural stretcher, and here you have a head wall with medical gases and places to plug in your specialized medical equipment. On this area, you have a diagnostic head wall with your basic tools for diagnostic treatment. And this is an examination light, which you'll use to further examine your patient. We're now in pediatric internal medicine. This can be found on level 1 of the pediatric bed tower at Couver Children's Hospital. On this floor, we have 12 ward rooms with either a mixture of 4-bed wards or single-bed wards. Also, the nurses' stations are efficiently designed so that they can monitor each corridor individually. On level 2 of the pediatric bed tower, you can find the pediatric intensive care units. We have 6 of these on this floor, and they offer special services for patients who cannot be in a regular ward. These patients will require continuous monitoring and the administering of special medications. We also have specialized medical equipment such as ventilation and critical care beds and patient monitoring. These critical care beds offer on-bed weighing mechanisms as well as chair adjustments, feet adjustments, and back rests. On level 2, we have the labor delivery ward. We have 4 of these rooms which offers facilities for the full delivery process, from labor and delivery to neonatal recovery and postnatal care. We also have facilities for the father or close relatives to assist with the pregnant mother. This is the neonatal intensive care unit. This is where, at the Couver Children's Hospital, we will offer care for our nation's most vulnerable. What you see here is a neonatal incubator. This offers a cocoon-like environment with optimal thermoregulation and protection from external factors. At the Couver Children's Hospital, we have 2 dedicated nursery areas with a centrally located nurse station for optimal monitoring and supervision. Also unique to the hospital are these viewing windows behind me. This is where the relatives of the infant can meet them for the first time.
This is our adult ICU, located in the adult tower of the new Couver Children's Hospital. There are 10 such units located on this floor, 6 independent high-dependency units, and 4 units dedicated strictly for burns. Some of the main features of our units are ceiling-mounted ICU pendants, which supply us with gas and electrical supplies for our critical care beds, our ventilators, and our monitoring system.
The hospital has been built in accordance to over 70 North American and internationally recognized building codes and standards, and also adheres to building codes for continued operation after seismic events. We have left no stone unturned in the detailed planning of the hospital's operations, thoughtfully considering every detail that can help aid in our patients' healing process and ensuring that the hospital's environment is also safe for our visitors and staff. UDECOT is proud to have been given the help to contribute to the improvement and availability of quality healthcare in Trinidad and Tobago.
I had said when I became Prime Minister in 2010 that my projects will be not those in tall buildings, but the projects that I will concentrate on will be in schools and in hospitals. this hospital will also be one to attract medical tourism. Yes, it will service our citizens here, but it will also be a light shining throughout the CARICOM, and that was what this dream that others spoke about, that is what it was about. This is a project that will endure for generations to come, and this hospital will be servicing the children and adults of Trinidad and Tobago.
The ultra-modern Couver Children's Hospital now ranks as the newest beacon in medical advancement and innovation in Trinidad and Tobago, as we seek to vastly improve the delivery of first-class health care to our citizens, with special emphasis on our children. And now better positions Trinidad and Tobago as the region's first choice as a premier medical tourism destination.
We stand united in the belief that if you empower a community, the community empowers the country.
We are the party that gave every child a secondary school education since 2001.
By building more schools in 11 years than others did in 40. We believe that no child,
rich or poor, should be left behind.
Which is why we give every 4-month student a laptop to expand their minds and their dreams.
We are the party that put police cars back on the streets
and gave the police a $1,000 bonus because we believe that we should support the persons who are protecting you.
We are the party that reduced the murder rate to its lowest in 14 years. We expanded GATE, stopped the property tax, and increased maternity leave.
We are the party that invested in you and in your community by investing in schools, community centers, lighted parks, 24-hour health centers, and the most extensive road repair program in decades.
We believe that education is always a solution and that no one should have to pick between sending their child to school or buying food.
We are the party that works for you. We are the first responders in every situation, working to deliver a better standard of living for you and your family.
And most importantly, we have confidence in you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago. This is not a campaign, it's a movement based on building communities and strengthening families.
Come out and join us, and together we will get the nation working and moving again. Our children will once again have access to GATE and technology.
We will improve healthcare
by cutting the time it takes to see a doctor in an emergency. We will establish a senior citizen unit in every major hospital and staff the hospital with the doctors and nurses you need to create a first-class healthcare system. We will focus on creating high-paying jobs, fixing our laws to remove red tape, and ensuring that you and your family are safer. We will reduce corporate taxes to jumpstart the economy, create a special investment zone along the East-West corridor, and work with entrepreneurs to build a digital economy. This is an investment in your community to move the nation forward and get TNT working again.
Whether you are from 4th Street in Barataria to Railway Road in Dow Village, from Green Street in Tunapuna to Clark Road in Dibay, from La Hoqueta to Moruga, from Mayaro to Scarborough, we are one people with the same dreams of a better tomorrow. And when we stand together, we win together. We are UNC and proud.
Everybody now, let's go. Come on, come on. Hey. Whoa, oh, whoa, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Whoa, oh, whoa, oh, yeah, yeah.
It's time to make a difference. It's time to turn that page. We got to do the right things if we want brighter days. Cause things ain't getting easy and the road ahead is tough. It's up to you and I to make the madness stop.
Every day the things getting harder, and every day the things getting rough, and every day they hike the food prices and they implementing more tax for the sake of our twin nation and the youths of the next generation. Let's stand united, show we not divided. Let's show them now and send them a message now.
pleasant good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, as I take the opportunity to extend a very cordial welcome to you on behalf of the United National Congress, where we are this morning at the party's headquarters out of Endeavour, more precisely Mulchan Sivchan Road in Chaguanas, to conduct another of our Sunday morning's press conference, where today, myself as the shadow with responsibility for Labour, and my colleague, the Member of Parliament for Oropouche East and the West, and the Chairman of the United National Congress, Mr. Davendranath Tancoo, we collectively will be focusing on the Auditor General and Nyquan as we continue to focus on the attack by this government on independent institutions, a government that has shown a lack of transparency, accountability, and good governance for the last 8 going into 9th year. And we in the United National Congress will continue to focus on the issues affecting the people of Trinidad and Tobago under the emerging dictatorship of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and the PNM government. Without further ado, I would now invite my colleague, Mr. Davendranath Tancoo, to the podium.
Thank you very much, my colleague and friend, Mr. Rudranath and Indarsingh. Good morning, members of the media, members of our viewing audience locally and across the globe on the various social media platforms. Ladies and gentlemen, this latest attack by this Rowley-led PNM against the Auditor General is just a continuation and perhaps an extension of a pattern of behavior by this government to undermine, infiltrate, and control our independent institutions. The framers of our Constitution established several commissions designed to be independent in composition and function, free from overreach by the government in particular. Mere months into the beginning of the Rowley administration in the latter part of 2015, we saw the executive overreach, which was to become a hallmark of the PNM rule, with the wrongful dismissal of the central bank governor. And over the last 3 years in particular, what we have seen is an aggressive, sinister agenda of the government to undermine the integrity of independent office holders by public bullying, intimidation, and outright abuse. Institutions designed to ensure accountability and transparency, especially in the use of public funds and in the preservation of the rights of citizens, seem to be particularly targeted. The public is now very much aware of this PNM government's relentless attacks on institutions such as the Office of the DPP, the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Integrity Commission, the Police Service Commission, and now the Auditor General. This must be condemned in the strongest possible manner. In the case of the DPP, this PNM has notoriously taken issue with the DPP's past and present. Coincidentally, when decisions of the DPP's office exonerated the PNM's political opponents. Further, the DPP's office has repeatedly complained of a chronic and acute staff shortage, inadequate and inappropriate accommodation, and significantly reduced funding by this government. May I remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that this is the office responsible for prosecuting alleged criminals, but the government's refusal to properly resource the DPP's office has effectively compromised the ability of the DPP in its critical role as prosecutor of criminal matters, effectively resulting in the denial of justice to many victims of crime. The eventual result, ladies and gentlemen, is that criminals are walking away scot-free while victims have little faith in ever receiving justice. Indeed, it was revealed by the media that the government racked up a bill of more than $45 million, ladies and gentlemen, more than $45 million in rent on a building purportedly tailor-made for the DPP's office without even consulting the DPP's office itself. The building was determined by the DPP to be inappropriate for its use. $45 million of taxpayers' money simply vanished under the guise of providing money for the DPP's office. In the case of another constitutionally established independent body, the Integrity Commission, ladies and gentlemen, who, following a $58 million cut in its budget for fiscal 2024, that office initiated proceedings in the High Court to determine the Commission's entitlement within the meaning of the Act. In response to this, the Prime Minister appeared to have taken a personal issue, stating, and I quote from a Trinidad Express article dated January 5th, 2024, bearing the headline, Rowley under attack for Rowley under fire for IC attack. And I quote, I permit myself to posit that maybe the issue is far too many ill-advised and politically motivated investigations have been embarked upon by the Integrity Commission, and the more circumspect investigations need to be conducted in accordance with the letter and the spirit of the Act. So according to the Prime Minister then, the reduction in funding is linked to his perception. The reduction in funding to the Integrity Commission is linked to his perception that too many politically activated, politically directed investigations were being done. Why, ladies and gentlemen, does the Prime Minister feel the need to continuously make such public pronouncements that put on full display his bitterness and animosity towards these constitutionally selected, these constitutionally created and constitutionally protected bodies? To attack one's political opponents in his usually bullish, venomous manner is one thing, but to openly dispense such a vitriol towards officers that he should be seeking to protect as Prime Minister and Head of State, officers that he should be seeking to protect, is both astonishing, reprehensible, and wrong. The entire country is aware, ladies and gentlemen, of the reports that the government's highest office holder intervened and interfered with the operations of the Police Service Commission after the submission of the recommendation for Commissioner of Police. And reportedly, because the Prime Minister didn't like the recommendation that the Police Service Commission was being made. I want to remind you too, Mr. Munilal Lalchan, then Chairman of the Office of Procurement Regulation, he spoke of billions being lost to corruption in state contracts. Needless to say, Mr. Munilal Lalchan, he too was eventually replaced. It is also now part of our public record that the entire Police Service Commission headed by Ms. Blissy Prasad was unceremoniously replaced after the Prime Minister seems to have lost confidence in them based on their recommendation. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are seeing a similar pattern continuing in the continued attack on the independent office of the Auditor General, one Ms. Jaiwanti Ramdas, again after the report was already submitted in keeping with the law, because the Prime Minister, a PNM Minister, aided and abetted by a bungling Attorney General, didn't like the comments and the contents of the report. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what all of this fiasco, all of this bacchanal with the Auditor General, all of this eventually boils down to. There's no substantial amount of information in the public domain and a substantial amount of uncertainty of the facts of this matter. 2 days ago, the Minister of Finance, in his preferred way of providing communication so he can avoid answering questions, posted the following comment on X. This is the comment, ladies and gentlemen. It says, the last week has seen lopsided opinions, uninformed commentary, idle speculation, foolish statement, and sensationalist articles on a matter that is under investigation. Why is it so difficult for the investigation's outcome to be so difficult? This is your Minister of Finance, ladies and gentlemen. It is once again an attempt by this PNM Minister of Finance to shift attention away from his role and that of his Attorney General in this sordid attack on the independence of the Auditor General. Firstly, what investigation? What investigation is the minister speaking about? Well, according to the Newsday of Saturday, May 4th, 2024, and the minister's own admission, the only matter he is seeking to investigate was the Auditor General's assertion that the Treasury Ministry of Finance submitted a backdated, revised statement of accounts. For this minister, ladies and gentlemen, this is the big issue that he wanted the country to focus on. He completely disregarded every other issue raised by the Auditor General because those pointed out to the multiple failures of the Ministry of Finance that he heads and he is responsible for. Ironically, despite Imbert's utterances 1 week ago about the need to investigate and his boof that 1.4 million people should wait, hold their hands, wait on the results of this independent investigation, there has been no public statement to date about the start of any such investigation, no public naming of investigators, no deadline for the investigation and report, and no clear statement of the terms and conditions of any such investigation. Why? Because in so doing, the minister is very likely to be commissioning the investigating of his own misconduct as Minister of Finance. Secondly, there is no evidence that the minister launched any independent investigation before he and his colleague, the Attorney General, engaged in the most reprehensible and vile abuse of parliamentary privilege in the House of Representatives and in the Senate to make serious allegations against the integrity of the Auditor General, Ms. Jaywanti Ramdas. I call on the Minister of Finance today to immediately tell this country the names of the investigators appointed, how they were selected in the first place, their terms of reference, and the cost to the taxpayer of this frivolous exercise. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to remind the population of the undisputed facts of this matter. And I want the population to pay very close attention, particularly to the numbers when we get there. The Auditor General received from the Treasury/Ministry of Finance the public accounts showing the full financial position of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year 2023 on January 31st, 2024. This is fully in keeping with sections 1162 and 1164 of the Constitution and section 24(1) of the Exchequer and Audit Act. The Exchequer and Audit Act, sorry. Having received the various statements, the Auditor General began conducting the audit of the documents submitted. The undisputed role of the Auditor General is to conduct an independent audit of the public accounts and funds, that is revenue and expenditure, as submitted by the state, in this case the Ministry of Finance/Treasury, and she must do so in full compliance with international accounting standards. The objective, ladies and gentlemen, of the Auditor General's work is to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from misstatements, whether due to fraud or error, and to submit a report with her findings to the Minister of Finance, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and the President of the Senate. Thereafter, their role is to ensure that the report is laid in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. This exact sequence has transpired for decades without a single problem. The submissions to the Auditor General and the submission of a subsequent report has always been done on time for decades until Imbert and Amo showed up on the compound. We advised, and this is all in the public domain, that 2 months after the legal deadline for the submissions had closed, the Ministry of Finance wrote to the Auditor General saying that they had discovered that they, Ministry of Finance, had made a massive error. They claimed to have received $3,379,777,908 more in revenue than they had calculated, and they wanted the accounts to reflect this multi-billion-dollar material difference. That is strike one, failure by Imbert's ministry. This is not a $5 bill that you forget in your pants pocket and discover it when next you wear the pants or when you are going to wash it. These are billions of taxpayers' dollars. Billions. In addition, this is a very specific figure. Up to the last $8 clearly received in revenue. How did they come up with this very specific figure? They claimed that this was revenue collected from VAT, individual income tax, and business levy. They claim further that this was largely a result of the challenges faced because of the introduction of the electronic check clearance system by the central bank. This is the only government that will increase the use of technology and make everything worse. This is the only government. But the story became even more complex and curiouser when in the very same memo in which a claim of a $3.4 billion more in revenue was made, and which they wanted the Auditor General to reflect on her accounts, they also submitted an amended statement of revenue telling the Auditor General that they had reconciled an amount of $2,589,130,761.72. Another very specific figure, including up to the 72 cents. What that means, however, ladies and gentlemen, is that they were not able to reconcile, which is to justify, they could not find the documentation to support, $781,647,146.28. Strike two. Strike two. So you wrote to the Auditor General, you told her $3.4 billion. Then you come back and you say in the same memo that you could not account for $781+ million, ladies and gentlemen. When the Ministry of Finance says that it reconciled this $2.58 billion, it means that they had found the evidence, the supporting documents, the facts, the justifications that proves, according to international accounting standards, that this was in fact the revenue received. So how then were they referring to $3.4 billion in the first place if they could not provide evidence of this? Where did they get this figure from? In the sky? And then it gets even more curious, ladies and gentlemen. On April 5th, 2024, another memo from Imbert's ministry with another new figure. Now, they claim that they had reconciled another $1.2 million received from the Green Fund, which means that the missing revenue was now to the value of $780,499,791.27. Strike three. Now, the Minister of Finance and his Attorney General have tried to make this fiasco about the Auditor General. It is not. From what I have just described to you, ladies and gentlemen, it is about the multiple errors by the Ministry of Finance headed by Colm Imbert and the attempts to cover it up. The P&M tag team have sought to distract the population and insult the professionalism of a highly trained and experienced professional with move-along about newness of an Auditor General who has decades of professional audit experience and who leads a highly qualified and experienced, competent professional audit team. This same P&M tag team attacked the Auditor General's integrity for seeking clarification as to whether the documents submitted late were in fact valid, studiously trying to get the population to ignore, that is the Ministry of Finance, studiously trying to get the population to ignore the fact that according to the documents in the public domain now, the Auditor General did in fact review the ministry's submissions their reconciled documents. In fact, according to the public documents, Ms. Ramdas clearly stated in her submission that she and her team of audit professionals were unable to get the appropriate audit evidence to justify the increased revenue that the government was asking her to write in her report. And today's Express tells the tale, ladies and gentlemen. Today's Express tells the tale. There is evidence that the Auditor General wrote directly to the Ministry of Finance seeking clarification, seeking the evidence to justify the claims that the Ministry of Finance wanted her to place on record in her report. I want to tell Imbert and Arbon, we don't operate so in this country. Independent institutions do not operate so. Pure accounting and transparency, this is not the methodology of operating. I want Imbert and Arbon to tell me where on earth they expect any first-year accounting students, much less an Auditor General, to put their signature to figures that they cannot verify. That, Mr. Imbert, is not accounting. It is simidimi. It is hocus pocus and does not in any shape, form, or fashion conform to the law or to international accounting standards to which the Auditor General must adhere. And the Minister is very well aware of that. So when he proceeds along this line, he knows exactly what he is doing, ladies and gentlemen. I want to tell Imbert and Arbon that not because they do not have professional standards, should they assume that everybody else is like them. This country must never forget that this is the AG who has reported to have been named and shamed in an international court and removed from a case because of an untruth he allegedly told in a legal document. And that seems to have qualified him to be Attorney General in the PNM eyes. This too is in the public domain for years and has not been refuted properly. So they believe that because they have no problems in providing untruths to the population, that everybody else must do it. This PNM cannot understand the concept. These ministers of government, paid by taxpayers' money, cannot understand the concept of integrity. This country must also never forget that it was this Prime Minister who boasted that the PNM operates like a mafia, the Cosa Nostra, and they maintain a code of silence. And he said that, and if you dare to violate that code, his PNM will kill you politically. Do you now understand the attack on this Auditor General, ladies and gentlemen? Do you now understand why this government is attacking the Auditor General? She refused to make the secret change in the figures demanded of her. She refused to follow the PNM code of secrecy. She refused to break the rules and regulations which guides her professional conduct because she is a professional. And that is why they have attacked her. Connect the dots, ladies and gentlemen. Connect the dots. If the Auditor General had demanded information, as we just said, and if the Minister of Finance was able to write to the Auditor General complaining and claiming that a very specific $3.4 billion variance in his statement of revenue existed, and then claimed that they had reconciled $2.598 billion in, and then a few days after, they had reconciled $2.599 billion, including now 73 cents, they found a cent somewhere. Why is it that the auditors from the Auditor General's department could not get access to the relevant documents to conduct and reconcile the variance? And that's what these emails talk about. That is what these emails talk about. Because the Auditor General was begging for information and the ministry was not providing. Why didn't the Ministry of Finance produce the relevant financial records and supporting documentary evidence of the claims they were trying to make of a multi-billion-dollar increase in revenue? Strike 5. Had the ministry simply provided the supporting documents they used to claim that they had justified $2.599 billion, or better yet, the $3.4 billion they initially claimed was the true figure of the error, then this matter would have been finished right there. Instead, it appears that Imbert's ministry either refused to supply the supporting evidence they requested, or simply did not have any. Instead, too, ladies and gentlemen, they rushed to spend God knows how much money to hire a senior counsel and a senior junior counsel to help write a pre-action protocol letter to send to the Auditor General. You cannot make this stuff up, ladies and gentlemen. This is the way that this government, this Minister of Finance, and this Attorney General is running this country. Ladies and gentlemen, the law established practice. The law and established practice require the Ministry of Finance to provide statements and supporting reports to justify the statements of revenue and expenditure of public funds. Once more, it has not been disputed that no supporting evidence accompanied the several memos asking and expecting of the Auditor General to change figures. Strike 6. If nothing else, that is what the Minister of Finance and his sidekick, the Attorney General, should be investigating. If nothing else, why documentary evidence to support the various claims of the various figures were not supplied to the Auditor General, either when the initial request was made or when the auditor sent a team to the ministry to verify the claims that were being made? Amazingly, Imbert and Amor seems to have expected the Auditor General to conduct a professional audit by memo. They wanted her to change the numbers, increase the numbers by $3.4 billion or $2.6 billion, depending on when you look at which one of the correspondents from the ministry, depending on which one. They wanted her to do that without a single table, a single report of supporting evidence. The question, ladies and gentlemen, that we must ask, ladies and gentlemen, is where is the supporting documentation? And it's here on your screen. Where is the supporting documentation with regards to the revenue figure to the value of $780,499,791.27? Where is that documentation? Why is it that the ministry cannot reconcile that figure? How do they know such a specific figure exists? And they still cannot provide any evidence of that. Not that they have provided to date, from my understanding and my knowledge, not that they have provided any explanation for any of the claims of increased revenue that they have made. Now, members of the public may have been distracted by the government's propaganda in the attack on the integrity of the Auditor General. But what we need to focus on is the integrity of a government which made a claim of $3.4 billion in revenue and 3 months after cannot substantiate it with any evidence. Why? Worse, Minister Imbert's ministry openly admits that they cannot account for more than $780 million in revenue they claim to receive. Strike 7. Where has that money mysteriously gone? Was this money ever received in the first place? All the song and dance and bullying and pre-action, and yet no supporting documents. All this venom and spite from Imbert and Amor, and the fact is that they did not do their job. To put this in context, ladies and gentlemen, $780 million could have fixed every road in this country. It could have improved the water supply so citizens in this country today wouldn't have to beg WASA for a truck-bound supply every 2 or 3 months because there is no water in their taps. It could have provided life-saving surgery for every single man, woman, and child needed it. It could have provided enough funding for the judiciary to ensure that the relevant infrastructure and resources were in place so that victims of crime could get justice on time. It could have funded the boosting of the number of police officers with enough vehicles, bulletproof vests, technology to make a substantial dent in crime. This missing money could have funded the clearing of watercourses, the construction of river banks and retention ponds, so that my constituency and so many others would not have had to experience the kind of flooding that we know is going to come. It could have prevented the government from having to borrow billions and billions and billions, indebting future generations with the highest level of international, intergenerational debt ever in this country. Strike 8. The failure and or inability of this government to account for billions of dollars in revenue that they said they received is a frightening situation. And not a soul has been held accountable, because the minister has successfully managed to focus attention on the Auditor General, whose only fault is that she asks for information to support, as she is entitled to, the claims made by the Minister of Finance that $3.4 billion or $2.6 billion, whichever figure that they choose to talk about at this point. That's her only failing. And that's what the Ministry of Finance wants you to focus on, when in fact they have failed to support any claim of any increased revenue to date, ladies and gentlemen. But the Auditor General also stated that Imbert's ministry did not provide documentation to support known expenditure of $1 billion. So government spent $1 billion and have not accounted for that either. What was this money spent on, ladies and gentlemen? Why is there no paper trail? Now, having worked in government before, I am aware of the very detailed procedures required before approval is provided for expenditure. How then was the executive able to spend $1 billion more? $1 billion, and not be able to justify, to provide any documentation to support their claim? I call on the Ministry of Finance today to provide details to the public of exactly which ministry or ministries this expenditure relates to and what action has been taken to hold irrelevant ministers and officials accountable. We must not, ladies and gentlemen, simply close our collective eyes to the inability of the government to account for such a massive sum, which is more than the entire allocation of several ministries. We will not and we must not allow this minister and his government to refuse to account for billions in missing revenue and expenditure. And he must provide those answers before he comes in the media review to ask you citizens of Trinidad and Tobago for more money. Again, this $1 billion, this is not the $5 you spent to buy some dinner mint and lose the receipt. This is $1 billion. Minister, you must account for what you got and spent before you shamelessly come demanding more. There's another issue, ladies and gentlemen. It's related. I have reviewed the relevant legislation myself and the motion brought to the Parliament by the Minister of Finance and passed in the House of Representatives on April 26th and in the Senate on April 29th, 2024. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year 2023 was submitted on the 24th of April 2024 to the Minister of Finance, the Speaker of the House, and the President of the Senate in full compliance with the constitutional requirement. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, the report is validly submitted within the deadline, and the next step is to have it laid in the House of Representatives and in the Senate and available to members of the public and the Public Accounts Committee, which I chair, in keeping with the Exchequer and Audit Act and in the Constitution. Section 25(3) of the Exchequer Act, ladies and gentlemen, plainly says, the minister shall lay the report of the Auditor General on the table of the Parliament within 30 days of its receipt by him, or, if Parliament is not sitting, within 30 days after the commencement of the next sitting. It is now recorded history that despite the presence of the 2023 report of the Auditor General being listed on the supplemental order paper to be laid on Friday, April 26, 2024, in accordance with the law, for the first time in our nation's history, the reports present in the House, duly laid to the hands of the Speaker, duly placed in the hands and submitted in the hands of the Speaker, the President of the Senate, and the Minister. It's the first time ever that those documents were not laid. What a total disrespect for the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the procedures that govern our democracy. What a total disrespect for the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. Instead, the minister sought to retroactively extend the deadline for submission of information by 4 months, despite the fact, so this was coming retroactively, despite the fact that the deadline for submission had already been passed by 2 months. And he sought to also extend the period of time for the Auditor General by 11 months, both for the purpose of the financial accounts for 2023. To be clear, the minister has under the authority of law to extend the time frame to anything he wants. That is not in dispute. What is of concern is whether this motion contains some provision which effectively scraps and renders irrelevant the current submitted reports by the Auditor General for 2023, which were submitted in due process of law and intent. I encourage citizens to read the motion on the supplemental order paper and see for yourselves. I also call on the Minister of Finance to explain why he did not seek to extend the 2 time frames before the deadline for the submission, before the actual submission. He had 2 months. Why did he not extend the deadline, extend the time frames for submission? If he was so concerned about including any documents or revising any figures, he had, ladies and gentlemen, 2 months based on the reports in the public domain from the Ministry of Finance and from the Auditor General herself. It seems common sense to facilitate the additional time that they claim that they would enable reconciliation if the additional 3.4 or 2.5 or 2.6 or whatever the new figure that the minister could come up with of undeclared revenue was collected, and to locate the justification for the 1 billion in expenditure that they simply cannot seem to justify. Instead, the minister sat on his hands, expecting that the bullying by the AG would have forced the Auditor General to breach of constitutional duties and professional code of conduct. Nonetheless, for me, the motion is on clear reading, does not contain any clear provision which facilitates the minister's not laying of the reports. Parliament, Trinidad and Tobago would have seen the minister sitting cockily, grinning, when the Speaker of the House stood up and called on the minister in accordance with law to lay the 2 reports of the Auditor General. Nothing. The minister said not a word. Not a word. What a shameless, coward act. Today, I use this platform to call on the Minister of Finance, Colin, to lay the report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the public accounts for the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ended September 30th, 2023, and the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year 2023 within the statutory deadline assigned by the Exchequer and Audit Act, which still is relevant. Minister, by that act you shall, and in law that is compulsory, by that act you shall lay the report within 30 days of receipt, as I cited the law earlier. And as such, ladies and gentlemen, I call on Minister Imbert, having received the reports on April 24th, 2024, to lay those reports in accordance with the law by the 23rd of this month, May 2024. Failure to do so will be a breach in law. And may I further remind you, Minister, that you are not above the law, and therefore you shall lay the report. Strike 9. Should the Minister of Finance fail to lay the reports in time, the standing orders of the House and the Exchequer and Audit Act at Clause 25 and the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago all provide for the circumstances within which the Speaker of the House of Representatives and the President of the Senate shall, that word again, compulsory, shall cause the reports to be laid and thereafter forwarded to the Public Accounts Committee for its query. The country will look forward with great interest to see if these high office holders will ensure that the relevant laws are upheld. I am confident that good sense will prevail. The country awaits. So this fiasco between the Minister of Finance and his sidekick, the Auditor General, this fiasco between the Minister of Finance and his Attorney General, his sidekick, against the Auditor General, has tremendous importance in our country as it relates to transparency, accountability, and the attempts by the government to subvert the integrity of the Auditor General. The job of the Auditor General is not to rubber stamp the demands of Imbert and his gang. Her job is not to close her eyes and just change figures because Imbert woke up one morning and decided that he didn't like the figures. What is scary is this is the same Minister of Finance that has been boasting that the country is doing well. So well, ladies and gentlemen. He has been boasting that the country is doing well. He has, ladies and gentlemen, submitted to the international lending agencies figures and numbers on the basis of which they have now, the international lending agencies, the international rating agencies, have received documentation and information from this Minister of Finance, which shows, according to their view, based on the analysis of these documents, that the country is doing well. But what happens, as has happened now, when the minister cannot provide justification for his numbers? What are those agencies saying today? What are those agencies saying today about the documentation that have been supplied to them? I call on the Minister of Finance today as well from this platform to share with Trinidad and Tobago what information he has provided to those international agencies, to Moody's, to Standard & Poor's, to the IMF, what documentation he has shown to them so that they can come to the conclusion, like the minister has, that things are going so well. In fact, every single citizen of this country, except the friends, family, and financiers of the PNM, know that this country is in financial, social, and economic crisis. I know that Amor has claimed that he recommended senior counsel and junior senior counsel to advise the Minister of Finance in his misdirected attempts to force the Auditor General's hand as well. I call on Amor today to provide the names of those persons recommended, how he selected them, and the role that they have played in this ugly fiasco so far. I call on the Minister of Finance as well to tell this country how much has been paid to date and for what, and what is the anticipated total cost of this frivolous excursion of his. The country deserves answers, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, you would have noted that I have stayed away from the comments about the contents of the Auditor General's report. A lot of that is already in the public domain. But from what I have seen in the very same public domain, this multi-billion-dollar revenue and expenditure scandal is not the only issue. But it is certainly clear that this may have been one of the intentions of the minister in trying to remove the reports from public scrutiny. If nothing else, what this experience shows, ladies and gentlemen, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is that this government cannot be trusted to do the right thing. Worse, they are willing to undermine independent institutions, engage in character assassination and PM smoke and mirror tricks to cover up their transgressions. They are willing to bring Parliament into disrepute by hiding behind parliamentary privilege. They are willing to breach the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. But the bright light of justice and the clear light of the rising sun will bring this government's misdemeanor, corruption, and skullduggery to light. Pay attention, Trinidad and Tobago. You may not understand all the intricacies of the Auditor General's report, but please pay attention to the discussions. This is not merely an accounting error. This is a full-scale attack on an office and an individual for doing the right thing in the best interest of you, the people. Not only can you not trust this government with your lives and the safety of your children, it is obvious now that you cannot trust this government with your money. The UNC, I give you this assurance as I close, ladies and gentlemen, that the UNC will not be intimidated or distracted. We will continue to hold this government to account. On this occasion, the Minister of Finance needs to stop running, stop burying, stop hiding, and start providing true answers about the billions of taxpayers' dollars which remain unaccountable to date, ladies and gentlemen. Pay attention, Trinidad and Tobago. Pay attention. This fiasco is not yet done. I want to hand over now to my colleague, Mr. Rudranath Indarsingh, Member of Parliament for Couver South. who will speak on yet another matter involving the wastage, the misspending, the abuse, and the failure of this government to account on an even on a significant project. My brother, Mr. Rudranath Indarsingh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davendranath Tancoo, for bringing up to speed as it relates to this latest fiasco that continues to plague Trinidad and Tobago in terms of a rogue Minister of Finance who has been unable to provide the Parliament with any logical rationale as it relates to the government's delay in laying the audited financial report of the Auditor General as it relates to the financial year 2023. And this morning, permit me just to take 1 or 2 of my minutes to remind the country that on Friday last, World Press Freedom Day was celebrated, the 3rd of May. And we in the United National Congress continue to value the media as part of a society because the media is the fourth estate which has that responsibility to bring the issues out in the open in the interests of the people. And the UNC is guaranteed to protect the constitutionally enshrined and sacred principles of press freedom. And it is known that in the last 8 years, our country faces a threat to all of its independent institutions by a government that has focused a sustained attack on offices such as the DPP, the Police Service Commission, the Integrity Commission, the Auditor General, and so on. And the Prime Minister has maintained attacks on individual journalists and media houses and so on. And today we encourage the press to be vigilant, to be in the vanguard on behalf of the people of this country, as we remember veteran members such as Dale Kola-Singh, Grenfell Kisoon, Therese Mills, Bobby Thomas, just to name a few. And today, on behalf of our great party and on behalf of our political leader, I join in offering condolences to the family of the late Mr. Indarsingh, who was nationally known by his alias or nickname Mr. Lapai for his colossal contributions on the political, economic, and social landscape of this country. And we in this party will continue to remember him for his sense of discipline, dedication, and commitment to the United Labour Front, Club 88, the United National Congress, and the All Trinidad Sugar and General Workers Trade Union. This morning, it is my responsibility to focus on the closure of Nyquan, which was reported in the Guardian newspapers of the 22nd of March. Nyquan faces closure. And this was widely reported in all of the newspapers of this country. And it has engaged the press, the electronic, and the print media. But the government of Trinidad and Tobago, the Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, and the Minister of Finance, and by extension, the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, continues to remain silent, where they seem to have lost the ability to converse with the rest of Trinidad and Tobago, because this is a government every Sunday morning or every Monday morning, at their whim and their fancy, they come with contrived press conferences in their response to of deflecting and trying to misguide the population in their propaganda. And we must not forget that when the Nyquan plant was opened in 2021, Prime Minister Dr. Rowley described it, and I quote, a resounding success. In fact, he said, a prime example of the successful development of the country's export potential through the collaboration of the private sector, the banking sector, and now the government. The Nyquan plant was considered a success, just like that of the Atlantic 1 renegotiation, Train 1 renegotiation, the shutdown of Petrotrin and the mothballing of the refinery and the promise of finding a preferred bidder, the questionable Dragon gas, Sandals was sold as a new opportunity. And where is Sandals today? These are examples of projects which are compromised by this government of gangsters who waste taxpayers' monies to the tune of billions of dollars and are channeled to their friends, their financiers, and their families, and who relegate honest workers to the breadline. Today, after 3 years in operation, Nyquan has sent home 80 employees. And this is not the first time Nyquan has been in controversy. In April of 2021, an explosion rocked Trinidad and Tobago, more so the whole of South and Central, causing anxiety, distress, panic, and worry about the operations of the plant. The plant was given a fit to work or to resume operations, and up till today, that there has been no effective and transparent communication or laying of any report from the Occupational Safety and Health Agency and the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries as it relates to the explosion. And in July of 2023, Alan Lane Ramkissoon, an employee of Massey Energies, contracted by Nyquan, died in an explosion. And the report emerging from this investigation into the death of Mr. Alan Lane Ramkissoon has not been made public in the interest of public information and justice. And in fact, the Prime Minister told the country it is on the official Hansard. The Minister of Energy and Energy Industries said that Nyquan was a private entity, and as a result of being a private entity, it cannot, the contents of whatever investigations and findings cannot be made public. And this has been the track record and the approach of this government. One only has to recollect the deaths of the four divers, Faisal Kurban, Kazim Ali Jr., Rishi Nagesa, and Yusuf Henry. Where is the OSH agency's report into these deaths? Kurt Etienne at Wassa, Rossi Mansingh at the ArcelorMittal plant. And today I also ask whether Rossi Mansingh died working for the receiver at ArcelorMittal and so on. And where are the reports? Because these deaths in the work environment, investigations were carried out by the Occupational Safety and Health Agency under the Occupational Safety and Health Act of Trinidad and Tobago, which is part of the laws of this country. And today, none of these reports can find its way into the public domain, and the Minister of Labour, Stephen McClatchy, he himself cannot find himself in the public domain. He has gone into total oblivion, and he's non-functional virtually as a Minister of Labour. And I will demonstrate this morning that Nyquan is not, whilst it may be under its articles of incorporation and so on, a private entity. There are a great amount of government, or what I would call state shareholding in Nyquan indirectly, and as a result of that, the shareholders, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, must be told what has happened at Nyquan from a financial point of view and also from an industrial relations point of view. Because a considerable part of Nyquan's financing was undertaken by Republic Bank Limited, in which the state owns a significant amount of the shareholding. And this is why I am saying that the government, through the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, cannot remain silent, no longer say that they have washed their hands. They cannot provide any information as it relates to Nyquan, because the shareholders of Republic Bank Limited, I'll give a brief breakdown. The National Investment Fund Holding, or NIF, accounts for 25.9%, 25.98% of the shareholding. The National Insurance Board of Trinidad and Tobago owns 18.84% of the shareholding. The Unit Trust Corporation, 3.1% of the shareholding. First Citizens Asset Management, 2% of the shareholding. And also, Massey Holdings Limited has its largest shareholder as the National Insurance Board, which owns 20% of the group. The Unit Trust Corporation, 4.5%. And First Citizen Asset Management and Republic Bank Limited are indeed shareholders at Massey Energy. And what has emerged is that, as I said, Nyquan has had its financing through Republic Bank and also investments or involvement through Massey Holdings. And we will want to ask this morning, and there are a number of questions that we want to put into the public domain, because we must be able to recollect, because we will continue to remind Trinidad and Tobago that in 2023, Nyquan's former Vice President, former independent Senator David Small, successfully sued Nyquan for the sum of $21 million, which was owed to him by Nyquan as it per contractual obligations. And we also must never forget that Nyquan emerged from the infamous World GTL plant, which was then purchased by the then PNM government of Prime Minister Patrick Manning and the then appointed PNM chairman of the late Malcolm Jones. And one of Nyquan board members, Alison Lewis, was a former permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance and a board member at Republic Bank. I repeat, a board member at Republic Bank, which lent Nyquan approximately $175 million US dollars with no security. I repeat, 175 million US dollars. My colleague is the finance man, and I'm sure he could do the maths very quickly to put this in Trinidad and Tobago dollars. This is nothing short of approximately at least 1.2 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars. And we have to ask the question, we are asking on behalf of the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago, what was the role of Alison Lewis in securing government backing for Nyquan and Republic Bank financing for Nyquan? And the plant, the World GTL plant, cost the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago $2.7 billion. We must never forget Trinidad and Tobago, that it was the UNC government which sought justice on behalf of the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago by bringing a lawsuit against the Malcolm Jones-led board for their role in conning the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. The Nyquan plant is a fiasco. It is a con job by the PNM pickpocketers who in every PNM government hustle to enrich themselves by raiding the treasury and conning the people of this nation. The purchase of the World GTL plant by the PNM government was one of the biggest con jobs ever perpetrated against this country by the PNM. And the Nyquan plant is a con job and magnitude of a continuation of PNM con jobs. We must never forget that of what the late Minister Johnny O'Halloran. We must never forget the PNM Tesoro scandal was being debated in the House when the Muslims stormed the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. We must never forget the $2.1 million that was paid by the PNM zipline government in Tobago. We must never forget what transpired under Kolahat and the company linked Sunway International. We must never forget these scandals because Nyquan was a PNM scheme from the beginning. It was a PNM scheme from the beginning. And this morning, on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we ask the Prime Minister, who is the head of this government, and we ask the Minister of Finance, who is the corporation soul, he cannot wipe his hands from this particular transaction as it relates to the involvement of NIBTT and Republic Bank, UTC, First Citizens, and so on, in relation to the level of shareholding they have in Republic Bank and also Massey shareholding or the Massey group of companies. These are two entities we believe, in the way it is communicated, that they are made to believe that these are private entities, but there is a tremendous amount of exposure to the taxpayers of this country. And today we want to know what is the debt portfolio as it relates to Nyquan in terms of ranging from its financiers and to its legal obligations to contractors and to the 80 employees of Nyquan. Is it over 400 million US dollars? And if we put that in TT figures, it is about $2.5 billion in terms of its debt portfolio. And that is why we want to be told how much is owed or what is the level of indebtedness to Republic Bank. What is the level of indebtedness to even within the financial system? We are being told the Teachers Credit Union, the Central Finance Facility Limited, PECU Credit Union, JMMB, and we also understand that First Citizens and Guardian Asset Management, they also face exposure to the tune of millions of dollars. And we are also told that Massey Energy is also financially exposed to over $100 million. And we are saying, as the opposition, based on the level of shareholding on behalf of the people and on behalf of the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago, the Minister of Finance as corporation sole cannot remain silent, and the government cannot tell us that Nyquan is a private entity, and indeed they have washed their hands and they are not communicating with the public of Trinidad and Tobago. And we have read that only yesterday there was a headline, I think, in the Guardian newspaper that the High Court gave Republic Bank time to submit a plan to save Nyquan. I have to ask the question, when the money was being backed or being lent by Republic Bank to Nyquan, and the government was backing this project, where was the corporation sole? Where was the board of directors and the management of Republic Bank in terms of, did they do a risk assessment in terms of this project? Where was the collateral? Did the board and the management demand or ask in the event of a collapse of this project, where is the collateral and how can the taxpayers retrieve monies? That was the fundamental question to be asked before this became a reality. Not now that you're extending some lifeline to try and save Nyquan. What is unfolding at Nyquan, we in the United National Congress can only deem it to be a cover-up. So there's a cover-up with respect to the Auditor General. There's a cover-up at Nyquan, and it is fiasco after fiasco under Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and the Minister of Finance as corporation sole. And we will continue to put the issues. We must not remain silent. That is the role of the opposition, because Trinidad and Tobago, there is serious exposure on behalf of the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago. There is a great degree of worry in the financial system of this country. And if I was an investor, if I was a shareholder in Republic Bank, or I was a shareholder in Neil and Massey and so on, I would be worried about the level of exposure. And in relation to NIBTT, in relation to UTC, in relation to First Citizens Bank and so on, we in the United National Congress, based on the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we are asking these questions. And in addition to that, I now want to turn to the industrial relations scenario which has unfolded here, because you see, even as 80 workers are being sent home by Nyquan, we see that these workers have none of the protection that was promised to them by the PNM. When the ArcelorMittal plant and Century was closed in 2016, and over 600 at ArcelorMittal was sent home, and over 200 at Century, and a liquidator was appointed. The then Minister of Labor, Jennifer Baptiste Primus of Schillingberger fame, lamented and cried crocodile tears that once a liquidator is appointed, nothing of such will ever be allowed to occur in Trinidad and Tobago. The Minister of Labor came in the constituency of Couver South. She came to the headquarters of the Steelworkers Union in California, and she promised a 10-point plan. She promised the creation of a national employment registry to reintegrate retrenched workers into the economy of this country. And this was repeated by the PNM in 2020. So in 2016, they told you. In 2020, they told you. And they said that such a scenario where when companies go belly up and workers being placed at the lowest end of the ladder or spectrum as it relates to the honoring of liabilities, they gave a commitment that there would be the amendment to the Retrenchment and Severance Benefit Act number 32 of 1985. And in their joint memorandum of understanding signed with the joint trade union movement prior to the general elections of 2015, the PNM government or the PNM party at that time of Dr. Rowley promised the country, they promised the labor movement, they promised the workers milk and honey, they promised them a land of gold and opportunities and so on. And Jennifer Baptiste said then, and I quote, "It is a sad day, and I undertake as a matter of urgency to fast track and put as a priority the review and amendment to the Companies Act, the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, the Retrenchment and Severance Benefit Act, and the Industrial Relations Act." Since then, she and neither, she's still, I think, on the compound of the PNM as the Labor Relations Officer. And we have the silent Minister of Labor, Stephen McClatchy, whom in his tenure too has brought no amendments to the Companies Act, no amendments to the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, no amendments to the Retrenchment and Severance Benefit Act, no amendments to the Industrial Relations Act. And today, I must ask on behalf of the workers of Nyquan, I must ask on behalf of the workers of Nyquan what has happened, and I must ask the Prime Minister, the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, and the Minister of Labor to tell the workers of Nyquan if they have been defrauded by those in charge. What has become of their national insurance contributions that were deducted from their wages and salaries? What has become of their PAYE? What has become of their health surcharge? Were these deducted and not remitted? What has become of their contributions to their pension plan? This type of thievery, fraud, and corruption and assault on workers in this country must come to an end. This type of financial crimes. How many examples must be told in this country when companies go belly up and insolvent that workers are left in the cold? What is TNTech and WASA and so on owed in other jurisdictions? Citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, directors of boards and management of companies would have been brought before the judicial system. There would have been people in jail, people behind bars, people behind, as we would say, lockup, and so on. And we have to ask ourselves, in this cover-up that is taking place at Nyquan, what is happening? Who is the government protecting? Is the government protecting the workers, or the government protecting those who are at the level of the board of directors of Nyquan and the management of Nyquan? And today, we are saying that in the interest of the workers of Trinidad and Tobago, that this kind of behavior, this kind of what we would call fraud, this kind of thievery and corruption, this being a political scheme of the PNM, where workers are now being made to pay the ultimate price, must not continue to rear its head on the labor landscape, the industrial relations landscape, and the financial system of Trinidad and Tobago. This lack of accountability and transparency cannot go undone, and we call upon all those who are responsible for this latest fiasco that there must be a thorough investigation. The Attorney General giving financial advice to the Minister of Finance, and he is hiring a battery of lawyers on behalf of the Minister of Finance and the government of Trinidad and Tobago to intimidate the office of the Auditor General, to undermine the office of the Auditor General, which is entrenched and enshrined in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, but cannot offer any sort of information to the 80 workers retrenched at Nyquan. And before I end, I also want to focus very briefly on crime, because this government, the latest being the owner of Crystal Waters Limited, the individual was brutally murdered in the constituency of Couver South, and crime is rampant. Arsonists, gunmen, carjackers, you name it, they are carrying out a reign of terror on the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And whilst I may say, because I'm a bit biased, that no citizen is safe in Couver South, indeed, no citizen is safe under Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley as the head of the National Security Council of this country. No citizen is safe under Minister Fitzgerald Hines, a failed Minister of National Security, who will attempt to continue to confuffle you and bamboozle you with words and taglines such as a whole of government approach, we will spare no effort, and arrest is imminent. We are following all leads, while citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, law-abiding, continue to be terrorized, to continue to be prisoners in their own homes because of the lack of tangible action from the government of Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you on behalf of my colleague Davendranath Tancoo, and I now invite him to join me at the podium, where we will make ourselves and we will remain at the disposal of two members of the media, as we will take whatever questions as it relates to what we have presented here this morning on Nyquan and the attack on the independence of the Auditor General of Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you, colleague. Before we go further, I just want to pick up on an issue that you just raised, because we cannot stand here this morning without pointing out yet another example of another failure by this government, and in particular by the Minister of National Security, as you just raised. This morning, we awoke to news that 12 more persons have been shot, with 4 of those persons dead as at this point. 12 persons shot at Powder Magazine, and 4 of those persons have just died. This is what happens when you have the most incompetent Minister of National Security in the history of this country. However, it seems that incompetence, corruption, incapability, and the one single ability to lie and mislead is what are the requirements to become a minister under this government. Not only is crime affecting every single person everywhere, whether you are home, whether you're at your business place, or whether children are at school, we also know, and I'm looking at today's Guardian, we also know that justice is not forthcoming. We still have issues with Dana Sita Hall. Remember that? A champion of justice in this country, and today, years afterwards, her death remains unresolved. The issues related to her death, the perpetrators of those crimes remain unresolved. Davendranath, Paul, remember those individuals. Those were stalwarts of our country. The Guardian newspapers also have several individuals, several situations, ladies and gentlemen, with children in particular, whose deaths, Sean Luke and others, whose deaths still haunt us today. And instead of focusing on spending resources in these activities and ensuring that police are adequately equipped, that the judiciary is adequately equipped, instead of doing those kinds of things, instead of focusing expenditure on the benefit of Trinidad and Tobago, as you indicated rightly so, the Auditor General has been fighting for Trinidad and Tobago. But the Attorney General and the Minister of Finance, they prefer to spend money to prosecute the one or two persons who are fighting on behalf of the citizens of this country. It is time, ladies and gentlemen, that we hold this Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of National Security, and the Attorney General and the Prime Minister to account. Just recently, I recall to you would have been in Parliament, my friend, when the Minister of National Security was boasting about his wooden ladders. Remember that? Yeah. He was, based on a question you had asked, he was boasting that the wooden ladders are in use and everything is fine. And he was in his possession at that time, he had in his possession a report of an officer who had been damaged using the very same wooden ladders. You see, this government prefers to operate under secrecy because they don't want the country to know. And as aggressive as the media has been, ladies and gentlemen, is the reason why the Prime Minister has also started to attack the very same media. As you had indicated, the attack on the independent institution of the media stems from the fact that the investigative reports have been busting mark after mark after mark of providing evidence of misconduct by this government. We remain open to any questions that media officials and members of the public would have sent to us via our social media platforms.
Thank you, MP. I have a question here from Urvashi Tiwari at TV6 News to MP Dave Tancoo. First question is contemplating legal action regarding the Auditor General's report already submitted to the Parliament, or to the report already submitted to the Parliament?
Well, as I indicated in my presentation, thank you very much, Urvashi, Mr. Tiwari. As I indicated in my presentation, there is provision right now for the minister to lay in the Parliament officially the reports of the Auditor Generals that he has already received. If he has failed to so lay, it falls onto the Speaker and the President of the Senate to so lay. If those circumstances do not take place, and we really are hoping that for the sake of the integrity of our democracy, that those things happen. If those reports are not laid as required by law in the Parliament, and all the various office holders fail in their duty, as always, the United National Congress will step up and take this matter to the fullest extent of the law to ensure that the democracy and the integrity of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago are protected from the abuse by this government.
Okay, I have some other questions here for you, MP Tancoo. How will this incident affect our ratings with international lending agencies?
Well, the fact remains that the Minister of Finance is who is responsible for sharing information about revenue and expenditure with these various international agencies, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, the IMF, Caritas, etc. And those agencies, they come to their assessment based on that information. If, as has happened today, we have been able to show that not only has the ministry not provided justification for the claims of revenue that they have made, not only has that happened, we cannot now trust that the ministry has, we cannot trust that these various agencies have in fact received the benefit of correct information. Now, when you have situations where the data provided by the Ministry of Finance is questionable and you cannot rely on it, then everything that the Ministry of Finance says to these international agencies is subject to question. When you have established institutions unable to provide true information, that is a requirement for international lending agencies. This attack on an independent organization, one of those that the international rating and lending agencies would have been looking at, does not stand well, does not augur well for the impression that these agencies will have about Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, one of those things, you would have noted that the Ministry of Finance, the IMF and so on would have said that there are positive and negatives. This could happen to improve the rating and this could happen to reduce the rating. One of the things I don't think that even the IMF or Moody's or Standard & Poor's would have even considered would have been the fact that the Ministry of Finance would have asked an Auditor General to increase the revenue by $3.4 billion and not be able to provide justification or evidence of that. It brings the whole rating into question.
Okay, thank you. Another question here is that Dr. Botawari, in a recent column, indicated that as chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, you can invite the Auditor General and the Ministry of Finance to the PAC to discuss this fiasco. What is your view?
Well, in theory, I can. Given that the Public Accounts Committee has a role and responsibility for interviewing and engaging the various institutions that treat with financial transactions, in theory, I can. However, it is my expectation that this matter will go much further. It is my expectation that the minister will abide by the law, as I indicated, and submit and lay the relevant reports in the Parliament. And as I said, if that doesn't work, the Speaker and the President has an obligation to so do. And if that does not work, this matter will go further. In any case, ladies and gentlemen, in any case, what will happen is that the public accounts of Trinidad and Tobago will be put and laid bare for all members of the public to see and evaluate for themselves.
Finally, there was a recent report at the last hearing of the Public Accounts Committee in which the chairman of NAMDEVCO stated to the committee that a minister had given him a verbal instruction to hire a particular consultant to do the strategic plan for NAMDEVCO. The then minister, Clarence Rambarat, has since refuted that allegation. This means that one of them is being untrue. So what next?
Well, that's a very interesting development because the Public Accounts Committee was in fact reviewing, and this also highlights the importance of the report of the Auditor General. The Public Accounts Committee was in fact interviewing NAMDEVCO, and the chairman, who's a political appointee, who was appointed by this current Rowley-led administration, the chairman made a startling statement that he received a verbal instruction and that he, as a member of the board of directors appointed by the PNM, he took a verbal instruction and implemented it. I will treat with that first. That in itself is a breach of all sorts. The minister, then Minister Clarence Rambarat, has now refuted that, which means that one of them is telling an absolute untruth. In one case, the chairman has made certain statements to the Public Accounts Committee. If what is found to be untrue is a comment by him, then that is a contempt of the Parliament and there are repercussions to it. If it is that the comments made by the then Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Rambarat, is proven to be untrue, then that is in the public domain and other actions can be taken with regards to that. I look forward, though, to more deliberations. This has not also been finished because it's a breach one way or the other. There's a breach of the integrity of the submission of the accounts, and that finding that there was ministerial involvement, the allegation of ministerial involvement, was on the basis of the Auditor General's report. So That too highlights the very important role that the Auditor General plays in her role as guardian of the public purse.
Okay, thank you. I have two questions for Indarsingh. First of all, you mentioned legislation that the previous Minister of Labour, Jennifer Batiste-Primus, had promised to lay but failed to do so. But what specific changes in the legislation are required to protect workers?
Well, of course, when companies go insolvent, workers are entitled to benefits based on their years of service, based on what is provided for in the Act. And in terms of the what we would call the totem pole, the retrenchment and severance benefit payment is placed at the bottom of the ladder. So there has to be an amendment where when companies go insolvent, that there's a commitment by the liquidator that whatever liabilities from a retrenchment point of view should be placed first, because workers, as a result of their employ in companies, they have financial obligations, they plan their lives in terms of children's education, health, education, housing. We could go on and on here this morning. In addition to that, there's an ongoing trend that continues to rise its head in this country. Employers deduct health surcharge, national insurance, PAYE, and so on, and it is not remitted to the relevant institutions, the NIB, the BIR, and so on. And workers, when companies go belly up, are placed again holding the rough or the bad end of the stick. And this is why we are saying the United National Congress is committed to ensuring that these pieces of legislation are indeed reviewed in consultation with stakeholders from a tripartite point of view. These, because, for example, all these pieces of legislation will take into consideration government, the business community, the labor community. So there has to be a tripartite discussion. And we will promote this national dialogue and social dialogue. The PNM government, the National Tripartite Advisory Council, which was launched by the Prime Minister with much fanfare and was supposed to facilitate such amendments and dialogue and so on. That had collapsed. Labour walked away on 2 or 3 occasions, and up till today, nobody knows the status of the National Tripartite Advisory Council.
If I may hold on, please. There's one more. Based on what you just said, these are important for changes in the legislation. But what about the existing legislation? If they implement the existing legislation, would all of these fiascos where business persons are not submitting these workers' documentation, would that not have taken place if the government was in fact, same Minister of Finance we're speaking about today, if the Minister of Finance had in fact taken the requisite action to implement?
Well, the whole question of the ultimate responsibility lies with the Minister of Finance. The oversight has to be with the National Insurance Board and also at the Ministry of Labor and so on. And this is where you have to, while you are the line minister, you have to ensure that you are supervising and you have oversight of all state entities under your portfolio. And this is why I am saying that the Minister of Finance cannot remain silent on the level of shareholding that the state has at Republic Bank, and also the involvement of NIBTT, First Citizen Bank, Republic Bank, into Neil and Massey Holdings that has invested a sum of money into Nyquan. So this is why when they say that this is a private entity, it has tremendous implications for the taxpayers of this country who continue to contribute to the financial sustainability of these state entities.
So that leads us to the final question about state involvement in the Nyquan. Because you mentioned how the state is very involved and entangled in the whole Nyquan venture. So what can the state do to protect taxpayers and workers, and particularly given your experience in Labor and I believe the Finance was.
Well, again, the state has to amend legislation to protect workers who are also taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago. And they have to do it in the context of social dialogue and tripartism. This has collapsed under this government, clearly, as I said, with the National Tripartite Advisory Council. And when it comes to organizations such as NIBTT, and where taxpayers have shareholdings in terms of Republic Bank, First Citizen Bank, and so on, they have to do risk assessments, board of directors, when they got involved in this Nyquan project. Where was the risk assessment in terms of this project? Where was the collateral? Was collateral demanded? I mean, such a sum of money being pumped into Nyquan, permanent secretaries should have been made aware of. Permanent secretaries, in turn, are supposed to make ministers involved, and by extension, the cabinet, and the cabinet has to demand oversight on behalf of the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago. So audit committees, risk assessment committees, and so on, they are supposed to function in the interest of the corporation's soul, the shareholder, the cabinet, and on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Right. On behalf of my colleague, on behalf of the United National Congress that we represent, I want to thank all members of the viewing public, members of the media, for their interest, participation. We look forward to continuing to bring information and issues to the public domain using this platform. I wish you all well. Please be safe. Let's continue to hold this government to account to ensure that we have better governance. Thank you very much.
And as we end, I would take the opportunity to ask all supporters, party activists, and well-wishers to join the political leader of the UNC and all activists at the Brazil Secondary School, our Monday night report tomorrow Monday, 7-8 p.m. sharp, as the political leader, the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisasa, leads a strong battery of speakers and the bandwagon of the UNC into the constituency of La Hoqueta Talparo. Thank you.
Everybody now, let's go!